Okay, welcome everyone to the October 23rd, 2025 MH Task Force meeting. My name is Ray Winch. Really grateful that y'all are here. Start if people want to put their name and org, anything else they'd like to share in the chat, free to do so. As a reminder, this task force is started out of the City of Tucson Commission on Equitable Housing and Development and the Pima County Regional Affordable Housing Commission, but is much broader than that. And part of what we're trying to do in coming together is to really look at what some of the barriers are, or have a lot of conversations where people are saying, we're facing this issue, we're facing this issue. So to bring people from various groups together to say like, okay, how can we overcome that? So very action oriented. And today we've been working for the last few months on coming together with some policy recommendations. So the bulk of today's meeting will be really just going through each of those. We don't have a lobbyist. We don't formally lobby as an organization. What we do is we make recommendations of these are the kind of policies that we'd like to see. So yeah, welcome people at any moment to raise your hand, unmute yourself. We have kind of 5 major policies that we've been talking about for this year. So we'll try to cap any one of those at 20-ish minutes, and also space for people to share other things that we want to prioritize. Again, these aren't finalized yet. Also think about too, if we have time to think about plan for resident engagement. You know that AMHO's having listening sessions. Poder Casas Mobiles regularly does a survey to think about, and door knocking too, about ways that we're incorporating the outreach that we're already doing with the individuals in all of the organizations that we're a part of, to make sure to be including people who don't come to a 1 p.m. Zoom meeting on a weekday in part of this movement. Does anyone else have anything they want to jump in on before we start sharing our slides? And once I start sharing, I can't admit to the room, and can't very well see people. So, and if you have
Ray, Andrew's the co-host, but you can make me a co-host too if you want me to admit people.
Great, thank you.
Yep, and I've got my eye out for admitting folks.
Great. I actually don't see how, if I don't know if I can give you that permission, but Andrew or Rachel, if you could give Elise that power. Sounds great. Okay. So I took from last month is really tried to look at what the different goals were that we had and trying to move those into a policy. So let me see if I can see my view button to zoom in. It's being blocked here. So the first one, a number of the policies that we talked about, and just a note too, I don't see our interpreter yet. Is our interpreter here yet? I think everyone so far does speak English. Okay, yeah. As soon as the interpreter comes in, if someone could let me know, we could pause and assign her and have people jump into their interpretation rooms. So can people see this so far? This, I'm gonna zoom to 125. Let's see.
I can see it.
Okay, great. So the first category was all looking at things that were related to utility billing. So we talked about wanting to have more transparency in the ways that sub-metered utilities are billed in mobile home parks, requiring that sub-meters are functional and that meter reads are accurate, and at setting the utility rates at the price that the mobile home park actually pays for the utility. Were some of the ideas that we talked through for different categories for trying to reduce some of the exploitation that's happening around master metered, sub-metered utilities. Now, all of those are governed by one statute called ARS 33-14-1301, which for some of you in the room means a lot, for others maybe less. It's a part of the Mobile Home Park Residential Landlord Tenant Act that many of us refer to a lot. So as we go down after this summary, we'll go through like line by line what changes might be able to address some of those concerns. The next kind of bucket is about the Department of Housing Authority. So as some may remember, and know for some it's your first time here, the Department of Housing is the authority that's given the authority to adjudicate violations of the Landlord Tenant Act. That's how it's explicitly written for the Mobile Home Park Landlord Tenant Act, is if people have a problem, they believe their landlord is in violation, that they pay $50 to the Department of Housing and file a petition process, go through an administrative law judge. And in that proceedings, what we're finding is that the Department of Housing and the administrative law judge have both said that they do not have power to grant residents any relief if there have been violations. So they will not pay residents back, or they will not require the park to pay residents back if they've been overcharged. And we are really looking to say, like, what's the point of having this process if there's no real power or authority? So one suggestion that we've had is to modify that part of the law. It says in the law specifically that the administrative law judge has the power to fine a park $500 per violation, but none of that money goes to the residents. So we talked about adding some specific language that says the administrative law judge and the Department of Housing have the power to grant money to the residents. Colorado has that, and a lot of what I've done, honestly, is copied and pasted other states' legislation into our statutes, which I think is a lot of how people write laws. It's been done in another place, it's working there. And I'll talk more about it when we get to that one. Also related to that one is currently the fee for the Department of Housing is $50 for filing a petition, which is a barrier for residents to have to pay that amount of money. So also looking, I'd like to get some input there on how we might advocate that and what amount people felt good with, but was recommending reducing that to $10 to maybe still have a small fee so there aren't frivolous claims, but not one that's a barrier. So when we talk about it, we'll kind of talk about those together. Also, many people are losing their homes after an eviction. The state of Arizona has very weak protections for protecting residents who own their home but have been evicted from the lot. So we'll talk through a few potential ways that we can address that. And then expanding the eligibility for the relocation fund. So I think most people here know there is a relocation fund that residents and parks pay into, so that in the event of a park closure, of changing a park from all ages to a 55 plus park or vice versa, or if the rent is increased more than 10% plus the increase in the consumer price index, those are all eligible conditions for a relocation fund. But it doesn't work very effectively. Not a lot of people are able to use it. And there are some ways we could strengthen that. And then finally, one that's not Arizona state legislative change, that's would happen with the Arizona Corporation Commission and the utility companies, because this would be regulated through a rate case. would be advocating for utility companies to extend low-income discounts to master meter communities. So Southwest Gas already does this. There are ways that others could do it as well. And TEP currently is in a rate case, so it would be really good timing for that if we were to advocate for TEP to do that as well. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say so far before we move on?
Ray,
Yeah.
I was wondering about the relocation fund. The amount that they allow is not realistic to the amount that would be charged to move. And I wonder if it shouldn't be like you had put in their actual cost and to define how actual cost is determined.
That's great. That's exactly, I think let's flush that one out together of what changes would make that useful. I think increasing those amounts is absolutely a part of that. We'll run through the other two first, the one about utility charges and the Arizona Department of Housing Authority. And then I think that one is fourth.
Okay.
A couple that I recommended not doing this session, but continuing to build towards and always having on, it's not that we're not working on them now, but saying, how do we work on them this year to build towards this being possible to actually be a legislative change? One is the tenant opportunity to purchase. So for requiring that a park alerts residents if it's being sold, and that the residents get the first opportunity to purchase the park if they want to purchase the park, as well as the last option too. So if someone makes an offer on the park, that they would get a chance to match that offer. It would take a lot of tenant support to do this. So thought that this year, rather than trying to put that on the legislative agenda, is to really build the education with residents, meet with resident-owned communities, have people really understand what that would look like to be able to draft that together and make sure that there's a lot of resident input on that. Also, I don't know, Andrew, if you want to talk at all about the price grant and the plans of the city of Tucson of supporting one of those communities and converting this year.
Yep. We had certainly hoped that by this time we would be farther along. And one of the pillars of the price grant is to use some money to engage with residents of a still as yet TBD mobile home park to help them purchase it and convert it to a resident-owned community with the assistance of a nonprofit, Rock USA, who does this nationwide. We are, like everybody, still in government shutdown limbo, but all signs pointing towards the price grant being fine. So everything I have is crossed. We've submitted everything. We just need someone to show back up at their office at HUD someday and click the button so we can get going. But when that happens, one of the things we'll do is to really use this price opportunity as a pilot program so that we can locally, all stakeholders, see what it takes to actually have residents form a co-op and purchase their park and kind of undergo that cooperative ownership as well. So I agree that given that and the complexities of it, perhaps tabling this until we as local stakeholders understand well what all it takes is a good idea.
And final one here, rent stabilization.
Can I ask a quick question of Andrew first?
Okay.
Are there any parks at all that are community owned in Arizona at the present time, or none?
If I go back in my memory, I believe that in the application for the price grant, two of them were cited in the state of Arizona. I don't remember which ones. I'll go back when I can and reread that application and send it to Ray for dissemination to the group, or
Andrew,
put it on next month's
I can
agenda.
answer that question a little more specific. Like there are two cooperatives in Tucson, which is a little different than a resident-owned community, but is a community-based government's model. And then there may be more cooperatives in Phoenix, but I haven't spent any time up there looking for them.
May I respond?
Please.
Yes, okay. My experience is that ROC helping people buy the parks will never happen unless the state and the city and the jurisdictions are putting up money, which is sounds like what you're doing. The next question is, though, once they buy the park, who is capable of running them? And I'm not sure that that is being addressed in the situation. And I know ROC gives a lot of advice. When you consider the survey that shows that 60% of the residents are single and living on one income, then there is little numbers, in my opinion, of parks in the area that can raise the down payment that is required to get a decent loan through ROC. So there's not that many that has happened. ROC has tried with a couple of other parks, Swan Lake being one, and they got $2.5 million pledged, which was not near enough. And in addition, that $2.5 million would give them nothing to operate the park if something happened. So there is a lot of issues that have to be considered in this. And I'm not aware, I have not been kept up to date on how much the county is putting in under that HUD money that you got to assist in purchasing. So just how much is the county awarding the two parks that you plan to help purchase under the HUD money? How much is being put in?
Just maybe if I could jump in there. I think this is really illustrates kind of why we're putting this on the plan of not trying to propose the legislation right now. So much more education and planning is needed before we're pushing this as a legislative change, especially working with residents to understand how resident-owned communities work, to look at what the funding structures could be, to have a chance for the city to support with these conversions. So if we could put that on one of our future agendas to really focus on education around the resident-owned communities and what potentials would be. And it sounds like there's probably consensus here that we're okay not making that our priority this year to try to implement legislative change around resident ownership.
Well, that would be very good. However, the people on the committee needs to be educated in that respect first. And so this is one of the reasons I brought it up.
Absolutely. Let's have the future agenda be focused on how we're educating around resident-owned communities and making a plan for that. So it's not just let's talk about that next year, but let's build for that this year so that next year it's more effective. And similarly with rent stabilization, one of the strongest protections is going to be having a limit on how much lot rent can be increased. That will be a huge endeavor. So looking to focus on building our relationships among people in all kinds of housing, apartments, single family rentals, to build towards that in the future. So that might necessitate something like a ballot initiative that would be very large. I'll pause for a second there, and then we'll start walking through the utility billing proposals. Any other comments before then? So this is the one that I think our group has some of the most expertise on, is modifying the statute that regulates how mobile home utilities are billed to require transparency, to require that meters are functioning and that reads are accurate. And then let's talk through what we think about setting the utility rates. So kind of some rationale for this is that the current language that is right here. And again, I've sent this to you all in your email. please drop in the chat if you didn't get this, if you're not on our list. The current statute says that if a landlord charges separately for gas, water, electricity, they need a separate meter for each user. So in red is what we've added in. To me, inherent in that, if you need to provide a meter, it should work. We're not finding that in court though. The court, they're like, you have a meter. That's ridiculous. Come on. So I'm gonna take a pause here too. Has the interpreter come yet? Okay. Bienvenida, Erlinda. Gracias por venir. No sé dónde está el intérprete. Rachel, are you able to check on that?
I will find Rachel and ask her, because I don't know who she invited or contracted with.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're
Entonces,
welcome.
el intérprete no ha llegado, pero Andrew va a buscarla ahora. Gracias. So for this, yeah, we'd like to add just the simple wording of it needs to accurately measure. And here's other things that to open for discussion. Entonces, primeramente, estamos hablando de incluir que cuando hay un medidor, tiene que dar números correctos. No puede ser lo que sea. One thing that they do in Colorado is that they also require that the park gives them the total amount that the utility charged, the utility company charged the park, and how much they charge residents. Y la otra cosa que hacen en Colorado es que en cada bill de cada residente tiene el total de todos los residentes de lo que cobraron de la electricidad y lo que cobraron al dueño del parqueadero. And they make sure to include what the park is using for its common areas, separate from that too, to include those numbers. It's a way of helping to address some of the issues with the really egregious overcharging. Some of the laws too, we don't have the specific language on it yet, but would invite anyone in this room to help us with some of the research of other states, is to prohibit charging for months when the meters aren't functioning. Look for some kind of recourse for what happens if the bill is not accurate. I'll stop at those ones. I'll stop sharing this screen for a second. Is that helpful? Maybe I'll keep the screen up so people can keep reading it. And take a moment for questions.
I want to say something about the way that they charge, because just a minute. Where is it in here that it says that they can't charge more than the single family rate? Is that taken out, or?
No, so that is under Part B. So this is
Okay.
Part A, and then
Okay.
Part B, which we can move to,
Well,
is
I just thought of what I wanted to say. Some parks I have heard are putting together the utilities with the rent. And then if somebody doesn't pay let's say they pay all their rent, but they dispute the utilities, and so they don't pay all the utilities, they can be evicted. So that's an issue that we have to make sure is somewhere in here. So they can't be evicted if they're waiting to find out if the utilities were messed up and they were charged too much. Does that make sense? Yeah. So they just lump them all together and say, this is what you owe. And they don't even, some of the parks don't even show the meter readings. A lot do, but some don't. Just to tell you, we're collecting copies of utility bills around the state. AMHO is. So.
This is Ray from Pima Council on Aging, and yes, we do see things like that. We'll be sure to ask for permission from residents to send you those if we run into any additional ones.
Thank you. We will redact any personal identifying information from those.
Okay, thank you.
Kath, the Landlord Tenant Act is very specific on what has to be on the bill. The problem is the parks are violating the law and nobody's
Exactly.
doing anything about it.
Yeah,
And so that's
exactly.
where the latest involvement with the Attorney General has come in. And she has been active in filing a couple of lawsuits for abuses and going on TV and telling the park owners, if they don't go by the law, that they can be, that she's coming after them. And so, of course, we all know that that is probably 80% of enforcement. And so, anyway, she happens to be the only person doing anything to assist us at this time. And so, anyway, but the law is very specific what has to be on the bill. It's not just the beginning, ending, and total usage. It also says the multiplier or the local utility company's rate for that particular utility. And that has to be on there. If that is on the bill, the resident themselves can calculate, check the usage and calculate the bill to know whether they're being overcharged or not. And so it's important that that local multiplier that the utility company uses is added in there and on the bills.
See, Andrew, do you have an interpretation update?
A little bit of both. Interpretation update. Unfortunately, I do not think we have one. Our staff person who generally arranges for those is on vacation this week and signals got crossed. I'm sorry about that. We will post the recording or have a recording available, and perhaps it can be translated in Zoom or YouTube when the person watches it. Unfortunately, that's not a good update, but that's my update on that.
Entonces el intérprete creo que no va a llegar. Yo voy a tratar de hacer lo más que puedo para traducir durante la junta también, pero no voy a traducir todo. So I'll try to be interpreting some parts of the meeting too, but not every word. Before we move on to the, go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, I had a point to make on the utility billing as kind of a commission member, but I don't know if you're moving on yet or not.
No, I want to look at this before we talk about the utility billing, which is the next one of, does anyone have any comments about the transparency and the idea of requiring the park to say how much they charge residents and how much they're charged? ¿Alguien tiene pensamientos de qué piensa de esa idea de requerir que el parqueadero comparta el bill del TEP, de la utilidad y también lo que están cobrando los residentes?
I have a question. Does anybody know what percent of utilities actually give some sort of a special rate to businesses like parks? And they might be paying less than the single family residential rate or whatever the prevailing rate is. And I know it's really hard to get that information, but does anybody have any idea? Does this happen? I think it happens, but I know in my park, the manager said it doesn't happen. They just pay the regular rate. But does anybody know if that happens?
I can speak to that. Most master meter parks are charged a commercial rate, which is often lower than the residential rate. So they are making a profit by charging the residential rate. It varies from utility to utility, but that's generally how it works. So they might not see it on their bill and realize that they're getting less than the residential rate, or maybe it's an intentional misleading, but they are usually charged a commercial rate, which is less than the residential.
Interesting.
Does anyone know if there is any kind of special reduction in rate for over 55 communities? I had heard that there was, but I'm not sure.
I haven't heard of that.
It may just be the commercial that rate that you referred to, but the transparency on that I think would be really important because it goes to motivation, and I think that people might be shocked at how much profit is being made over the increase in charges from what they actually pay to what they're charging the residents.
One thing to keep in mind about that is that the park is responsible for maintaining the equipment. They're responsible for maintaining the transformers, which are large and cost a lot of money. And so when you're talking about limiting them to the amount that they pay, then you're moving that cost over to the side that is going to increase the rent as well. So, you know, you need to consider all of the back and forth of that.
That could be, the cost could be factored in, I think, to give a more accurate picture.
Well, I do know that Swan Lake had a generator go out, and it cost them $1 million to maintain utilities for the residents during that time that it took them to get a new generator in. And, you know, so we're not talking about a small expense at all. So, you know, we need to be reasonable in our thinking about this.
And Ray, I don't know if anyone else has encountered this issue, besides myself, of being charged utilities that are not in my lease agreement. I'm being charged as though I had signed a different lease, but I'm still under my original lease. Yet they charge me for the utilities that are supposed to be included. And they've told me I must pay them or I would risk eviction. You
And
know
that one
anyone
might-
else that has that issue? Kath,
Yeah.
you?
We were promised free cable. Does that count as a utility? I don't know. And also free landline telephones, and those both disappeared because the infrastructure fell apart. I don't know if that's the same or not. Not really. I don't know it, but I guess some people are promised sewer or water or something, and then they start charging them for it. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about water, sewer, garbage, which is supposed to have been included. And I'm being charged for every single utility, all the bases, the taxes, the fees, as though I was on a different lease, yet I'm being charged an extra $25 a month to stay on the original lease. So they're charging me to stay on the old lease, and they're charging me as though I was on the new lease.
Maybe since that is actually just a violation of current law, that there is current law to protect against that. We won't get too much into that here, but maybe it does go, you know, that actually might go into the next section too about enforcement. We'll take just another minute here to look at, this is, again, this law for 33-1413. That was 01A, this is 01B, and this is the section that talks about how they charge for utilities. This isn't the one about adding a new charge, that's in another area of the Landlord Tenant Act. But here looked at a couple of options for what different states do for the utility charges. And this one I think might have a lot of conversation. So currently, if a landlord charges separately for utilities, the landlord shall not charge more than the prevailing basic service single-family residential rate charged by the serving utility or provider. Now, what's not in that is that residents might pay less if they were a direct utility customer because they could get low-income discounts, and they can't here. So we're finding that residents do end up paying more than if they were a single-family direct residential customer. Potential ways to address that, and again, this is mostly copied from other states. There are a lot of states that don't allow reselling utilities at a profit. So one state language is a park owner who purchases from a publicly regulated utility any electricity, gas, or other utility service for resale to a resident may not charge directly or indirectly for the resale an amount that exceeds the amount that the utility charges the park owner. The management shall not charge a homeowner or residents for any costs in addition to the actual costs of water utility billed to the management. The amount charged must never exceed the prevailing basic service single-family residential rate charged by the serving utility or provider. And the other one is pretty similar from a different state. That a park owner who, Andrew, you want to jump in here? You want to wait till we read this one? A park owner who redistributes utility service may not charge a resident a commodity rate that exceeds the commodity rate at which the park owner purchases utility service. Before billing residents for redistributed utility service, a park owner must deduct utility service used exclusively or primarily for the park owner's purposes. If a utility bill that a park owner receives from a utility provider separates from variable consumption charges, a fixed service or meter charge or fee, taxes, surcharges, or other miscellaneous charges, the park owner must deduct the park owner's pro rata share. So basically they are charging the same amount that they get charged at the commodity rate. They have to deduct how much they use for the swimming pool, for the common areas. And also a park owner may not charge or collect from residents any administrative, capital, or other expenses associated with the distribution of utility services, including but not limited to disconnection, reconnection, and late payment fees. And again, around that issue that was brought up earlier of that would be included in rent is exactly, this is a lot of states say you cannot resell utilities at a profit. You have to put that as part of the rent cost. Include that as the regular capital, because it kind of like ends up being a hidden cost. I'll go on mute, and Andrew.
Yep, I just, Mary Alice hit on it a little bit earlier as well. But, a couple things when I read this. First, I think that, to me, it feels like the thing to strive for is absolute transparency and, only charging what you, the landlord, are charged. I don't think the landlords have a choice in whether they would somehow be charged higher, than a single family neighborhood of homes. So it doesn't seem fair that we would ask the landlord to resell it at a loss because the mobile home owner would pay less if they were in a different neighborhood. I mean, that might be real, and that would be kind of weighed out in the lot rent and the choice to rent in this park versus that park. But certainly insisting on transparency and no markup, although I do think it's fair to allow some sort of administrative fee markup, capped 5%, 7.5%, something like that. I mean, there is extra work. I know that you could just let the lot rent take care of it, but if you were to allow for some small admin fee charge to collecting all these small pots of money and paying to TEP, and also taking on some risk as a park owner that you couldn't collect it all, it might smooth the way for the park owner lobby to get behind something like this.
Elise, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was wondering for the common area utilities, right now, are we observing that a lot of those costs are being folded into individual owners' bills? Or like, is that something we've observed happening a lot?
I think
We don't know.
I'm not aware of it.
We don't know.
I don't think that's happening because we're all on separate meters. The amount that they pay for utilities for the common areas is reflected in our rent, not in our utility bills.
I guess that would be my point then. If you're not seeing it happening, you probably don't want to legislate around it. But if it is a problem that you've seen occurring where they're folding these charges into individual bills, then I could see some language around that. But like you mentioned, they would probably just shift the fee over into your rent costs.
Well, I think you need to know how many parks, if there is any parks, which I'm not sure of, Claire probably can answer this question better than I can. Any parks that but they divide the amount of the utilities amongst the residents. I know on water they do that, but not on electricity and gas. And so I think you need to know exactly if anybody was affected before you legislate on it. And I'm not sure, except on water, that there are any parks that are affected.
It would be water and sewer, because aren't water and sewer, don't they sort of just in and out? They have the same amount. That's what I see on my bills anyway.
Water and sewer is, I think, legally calculated by the previous year, like they can do the rate once a year.
Oh. Okay. Hmm.
Kim, I saw you just put in the chat that Twin Palms just sent notice for Universal Electric. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, I was just helping a lady who is going through changes with Twin Palms that was bought by some family in Florida, and no one knows where they are because they never told us. But anyways, we put in a complaint to the AG today because they just sent the notice out in August that they are going to do I forget how they termed it, universal electric. You will no longer be getting individual bills. We're going to bill the whole place and we're going to divide it by how many homes, and you're all going to pay the same price. And it sounds illegal to me because our law says that you have to have individual meters with individual bills, and each meter has to have readings every month. The last 2 months, they have not received any electric or gas charges. So they're so afraid that come next month, they're going to get 3 months worth and get slammed with a bill they can't pay, which is then goes on to turn into evictions.
Well, that
So-
needs to go direct to the Attorney General because
Yep.
that's an obvious violation of Arizona law. And who
Yep.
cares if the people are from Florida? We don't really give a damn if they're from Florida, to be frank.
Nope.
And so that is
So-
a direct violation of law and should be a petition filled out and sent direct to the Attorney General right away.
Yep, it's in the, well, it's in my hand right here. I was hoping we were going to be downtown for this meeting and I could drop it off. But yes, it'll go in today.
Good.
I think that's one of the real benefits that we have in the Residential Mobile Home Park Landlord Tenant Act is this part which says, if a landlord charges separately for gas, water, electricity, there shall be a separate meter for each user. It
Yep.
does not allow for the ratio utility billing system. And we see in other places, in Claire, I'd love to jump to you here, where the exploitation with when there aren't meters, when it's divided among the residents, we're seeing crazy types of exploitation in other states. I can send out some articles about what's happening in LA with some of the residents there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to see that comment brought up something that issue I've heard throughout my time of being involved in this, of people not getting timely bills, that waiting 3 months. That's I've heard of people not getting a bill for 6 months, then getting a whole thing, or them getting back charged for bills back from 2018 that supposedly they didn't pay. And so
Yep.
is that maybe something to address in these as well, of like, it must be monthly or whatever, follow a cadence that's
Right.
at least prescribed in the
Well,
lease.
I believe it's in the statutes that the electric statutes and what electricity, it's in their own policy, but nobody follows the law. So
Yeah, I do believe they have to bill at the same cycle that they would be billed if they were a direct utility customer. I'm trying to find that here. So I think that's more of a violation of the existing law than the need for a new one there. I'd love to get into the accountability one. I know we have a couple people on the call today who were involved in the administrative law judge proceedings. and they have a lot to say about the need for that group to have more power, but wanted to get a little bit more consensus of this part of, do we think this is something that we want to push for not allowing them to charge more than they get charged, or do we not want that to be a priority right now? Do we think it's going to have too much opposition? Is it worth fighting for it? Especially folks who haven't had a chance to speak yet, and then maybe those who've already spoken.
Ray, I think that would be ideal, but maybe there's just a little bit more research that needs to go into it to take a look at what the point that Mary Alice made about our administrative, is there administrative costs? Transparency seems to be the issue that should be the top issue as far as I am concerned, because that's going to tell you what's going on if everything is transparent.
True.
Were you going to say something, Andrew? I see your hand raised from earlier.
No, Jan said it. I think that transparency is key, and this can inform future policy decisions. We don't even have any sense of whether there's a problem or not of I mean, I'm sure there is, but we have no evidence. So we need to start getting all these things on the record.
Well, I can offer an opinion with my time working with mobile home parks and the time that I spent negotiating with the Mobile Home Owners Association. I don't think you stand a chance in this legislature to get that passed. I definitely do not. I think the best thing you could do is go for enforcement of the current law.
Yes.
And with strict enforcement, because one of the board members of MHCA told me that they know how to weaken the law, and it don't matter what we ask for. They know how to negotiate with the legislature to get one word put in there in the law so that it makes it ineffective. And so you're battling people that are not gonna go for this to be able to go back. Now, it was at one time when I moved in the mobile home park, it was that they could not charge more than what they paid, but that changed, and I've not been able to track down exactly when that happened. It was somewhere between in the late 90s or early to late 90s, I would say, that the law changed, and I cannot track down when it happened. So I don't think you'll get it passed that they can only pay what the utility company charges them. I don't think you stand a chance. I think you'll lose the whole thing, to be honest, by asking for that.
Ray, I go back to the thing I say all the time, is that it seems that most of the issues that we are dealing with, it boils down to accountability and enforcement of the landlord tenant laws. And maybe that's where we could put effort that would be productive as far as getting results, accountability, and enforcement of what currently exists.
Okay, maybe take time for one or two more questions, comments, opinions, and then let's talk about enforcement.
At one time, we had some people that enforced it at the Department of Housing. Does anybody actually know I mean, I've heard rumors, but does anybody actually have the facts of when that group of people was let go under Ducey? Does anybody know?
Harold Judd does.
Okay.
Harold Judd told me the story.
Yeah, well, I've heard the story. I didn't get the dates or the specifics or anything like that. Is this something we could do outside of the legislature, maybe? Just through the Department of Housing?
I would think so. The Department of Code Enforcement. There's got to be somewhere they can put us and make a department.
So maybe I could speak a little bit of where that's currently legislated, and then folks from Flowing Wells, if any of you are willing to share some of your experience here. This next recommendation is to modify ARS 414063, which is the statute that gives the Department of Housing authority through the administrative law judge proceedings to enforce the Landlord-Tenant Act. So the suggestion would be to explicitly say that they can award damages to residents, and also to prohibit landlords from passing on penalties or legal fees, which I think is actually really rare, if ever, that they pass on the legal fees to the residents, but it's in a lot of leases. And by not having it be prohibited, they can use that as an intimidation to get people to not make complaints. So a little bit about the rationale, which a lot of people here know. The Department of Housing is the entity with explicit authority by statute to, quote, adjudicate complaints regarding and ensure compliance with the Arizona Mobile Home Parks Residential Landlord-Tenant Act. Well, the case could be made that this would include issuing refunds, requiring that refunds are issued to residents who are improperly charged. I still believe they already have that authority under existing law, but it's not explicitly said in the statute. And other states, they say it. They say in the statute that they can do that. So to have it be so that they can't argue that they can't, that they know that they can, and that everyone knows that they can. So ARS 414063 could be expanded to include explicit authority to award damages to residents and prohibit landlords from passing on any penalty or legal fees to the resident. So here's an example from Colorado. The Colorado Division of Housing has the explicit authority to order, quote, refunds of rent increases, improper fees, and charges collected in violation. They have the additional authority imposes significant penalties for violation, like $5,000, $8,000, $10,000 versus the $500 that they can in the state of Arizona. And they can prohibit landlords from passing on the cost of fines, penalties, attorney fees, or remedial actions to the residents. They also prohibit a landlord that has been found in violation from increasing the rent for 12 months, which I think is a really important part of this too, because even if you say you can't pass on the cost to the residents, if there's no rent control and there's no limit, they could do it anyway. So that 12-month, at minimum 12-month for not allowing rent increases, I think could be a really important part of having the Department of Housing actually have some real authority there. So before I go to the line by line, I'll stop sharing and see if anyone has comments, questions, or if people want to share their experiences working with the Department of Housing. Yeah, go ahead, Elise.
I was curious too. Because I'm new to this area, so I guess your experiences would be really valuable here. But when I looked up the Office of Administrative Hearings annual report, last year they only had 12 cases that were listed under the LTA. I was wondering, so my understanding is you file with housing and then they investigate and then they kick it over to OA if they need to, if they think that there's a violation. Are you finding that maybe housing is not, maybe doing their job or using the correct criteria to kick this over to OA? It just seems like there's a really low number of OA LTA cases, landlord-tenant cases.
Well, it is a very low number of LTA cases because the residents are intimidated with eviction notices if they speak up, and in writing eviction notice, they're told to cease and desist. And so there is a law against retribution, but again, nobody's enforcing the law. So it is a very low number. When I had the last meeting with Arizona Department of Housing, I think in September, and before Joan left, they said they only get about 2 cases a month, and they were a little perplexed at why it was so low. But of course, it doesn't take much, to think about it with what's going on to know why it's low. And so, and as far as the Arizona Department of Housing, I have a very low opinion of how they've handled the job. They have done a very lousy job. They've actually violated the law, which I know there's proof of, where they violated the law. When you send a petition to the Arizona Department of Housing, they review it, the paperwork, make sure everything is there. And this is what they say is their only job. And then pass the paperwork over to the administrative law judge's office. But what happens is the petition goes there, they review it, and then they send it to the owner of the park for a response. And then they have, I believe, 20 days to respond. If they don't respond in 20 days, the law says that that's an admission of guilt. Okay, the Arizona Department of Housing actually called the owner of a park at the end of the 20 days and said you didn't respond. And his response was, according to what I was told by the people that filed the petition, the response was, well, his manager, he didn't know anything about it. His manager had not picked up the mail in 2 weeks after he investigated. So they gave him an additional 20 days, which is an absolute violation of the law. So there again, they showed favoritism to the landlord over the resident. And so, and as far as the number of cases, I just told you why the number of cases are so low.
So it sounds like the problem is more with housing's process than necessarily, well, a lot of them are not getting to the ALJ process to get these increased damages and fees that you're looking for in the legislation. So it's more housing's issue where the problem is.
I would like to see the whole thing, including the relocation fund, removed from the Department of Housing, totally. And it was not handled by the Department of Housing before Ducey came into office. And it was handled by Fire and Safety, and they actually did a decent job on the petitions. And they were fair from what I've heard. That was a little bit before my time, but I would like to see the whole thing removed from the Arizona Department of Housing because of the way they have handled everything. And, it's also my understanding that they under the sunset laws, and right now they are under threat from the legislature and were about to be shut down at the last legislature, and they managed to get 1 more year. And so at the end of 2026, it's debatable whether they're going to be around or not. So
on that point about whether it's the Department of Housing or the administrative law judge, I think it's really both. And the landlords, like we talk about the filing fee that's a Department of Housing, and the Department of Housing, they get to make the decision. It says in the statute, it'll be determined by the Department of Housing. So that I think is a relational change. It doesn't take policy change. So I think that's one thing. This part about the residents having it in their leases that they're going to have to pay attorney's fees is another huge intimidation factor. We can't allow that and have this process work. And then I think this part about it, the retaliation part is huge, right? And that is a harder one to address in this, except that if we have much more structures in place that are enforcing so that residents could say, okay, but I know that if I get retaliated against, someone will have my back, to also reduce that, not just that fear, but that very tangible danger. But the part about the ALJ is still there of not wielding the amount of power that they could. And we can't leave it up judge by judge. It has to explicitly say they have the power to issue refunds. If they don't have that, like, why would it make these complaints? Like, what's the power of issuing a complaint? I think they need more explicit authority.
There has to be a penalty, there has to be a law, there has to be a penalty, and there has to be enforcement. Those are the three things that has to happen in order to get control of this situation.
You're right, Mary Alice.
And does anyone know what the penalties are? I mean, we have the laws, but do we have the penalties for each violation?
I see Katie's hand raised, and then I can answer that one.
My comment is, I agree with Mary Alice. What I don't see is that the penalties are so low that the owners just think, oh, no problem. We have to come in with something substantial to get their attention, to show that we're very serious about this now. It can't be $500. It needs to start at $5,000. That will, I think, get their attention. That's just an opinion. Thank you.
I agree totally. Vermont has a law in place that if you take away anyone's universal utility, such as water, gas, or electric, automatically $5,000 fine. No questions asked. Then we'll talk.
Yep.
You know, $500 to evict someone instead of $63. We need fines that will intimidate them like they intimidate us.
And who's going to collect those fines, and where is that money going to go, is my question. If somehow the money was collected, where's it going to go? Who gets it?
Well, I suggest that you start an office for mobile home phone calls, and that money goes to pay for the people that answer the phones and send the people out. You need a little crew of people. Homeland Security pays all their own bills. The Homeland Security is still running because they get all of their paychecks are paid by their fees that they charge. So the fees pay the employees to sit in an office, take the phone calls, go out and find the fees, apply the penalties, and the money comes in and it pays the employees there. And if there's an overflow, then it goes to make a mobile home future fund for people who need help with their mobile homes. And we currently have $8 million sitting in a fund that nobody can touch.
That's right.
So what good is that? That's what I think. Thank you.
Andrew has a hand.
Yep, I think Kim hit on a little bit of what I wanted to mention when I read this morning. It's a fine line, I think. One of the proposals is to lower the filing fee from $50 to $10, and I think the making it not a barrier for people is right and noble. But on the same side, if it leads to more filings, therefore more investigations and more enforcements with the same amount of people at ADOH or at the administrative law judge's office, it becomes really hard to do. And maybe I'm the only civil servant on the call, but I've been on that side of needing to do more with the same amount of people in the office. And that's tough to just be able to do everything with dwindling economic resources at the government level. But that's why I really perked up when Kim started talking is what, when I was at the state of Colorado, we did was use those registration fees or fines or whatever to fund the Office of Enforcement. And therefore there were enough people to go out and actually double check meter readings on a spot basis, all these things that we want to do. So my only caution is be careful of asking a state agency to do more with the same amount of financial resources, because it does take people in order to do all these enforcements.
Andrew, the Department of Housing already takes $7,500 a month out of the relocation fund. That's their fee for managing the relocation fund and the process. So the last time I looked at one of their board meetings, they were getting $7,500 a month. And so, they're charging quite a bit, but that comes from the residents' taxes in the relocation fund. It doesn't come from the owners in any way. The owners should be more responsible in that respect. However, the owners do put money into the relocation fund only when they close a park. That's the only time they put money in the relocation fund. There was a little bit in the last September meeting, a little bit of confusion about who funds the relocation fund, and I'd like to clear that up. The relocation fund is paid by a line item tax on the resident's property tax bill. And that is in the law that says 50 cents per $100 of their assessed value of their mobile home. That's how much they currently pay. When the fund gets to $11 million and maybe a little over, I don't remember the exact amount, the director notifies the assessor to stop billing the residents. And so they have a holiday there in that situation. So there was some comment about they thought that when a mobile home is sold, that, you know, by the manufacturer, there's money put in the fund. That is absolutely not true. And, you know, nobody else puts money in the fund except the residents and the owners whenever they close a park. That's the only people that put money into the fund.
Interesting.
I heard comments come up on two topics there. One about who should be administering this fund, right? Because this is residents' money of our residents getting a say of who's administering it. And the other one I already forgot.
Was it actual cost versus the cost, the limit of repayment or support for relocation? Now, I think, isn't it 20,000 for a double wide and less for a single wide, which isn't realistic to today's prices for relocating a mobile home?
The other one, because we're gonna get explicitly to relocation fund after this one. The other one was about registration fees. Is that something that we want to prioritize of requiring all park owners to register like they do in Colorado? And
Yes,
have that be
Yes.
both a base of fees, but also a mechanism for taking licenses away if parks are in violation,
yes.
knowing where all the parks are. I want to speak to that.
Absolutely. I think we need to know how many parks we have and who owns them. And when there's a violation, how to get in touch with them. Why is it our job as residents to research all this? It should be available to us through the state we live in.
Yes.
Go ahead, Kay.
The problem is, we found out in our area, up in the Cottonwood area, that the three primary major ones, that's Inspire, ELS, and Hometown, are not even registered with the state of Arizona. They are foreign investors. So, Kim, that problem, here's where it starts right there, is that they have found ways to not be accountable to the state. And I think that that is kind of a major issue that we really have to look into. And how we can address that in the LTA by stating that you have to be an Arizona-based company will look at Kim. Yeah, we were just very shocked when we found that out. And when we went to Inspire, that's who owns my park, and asked them directly, the answer was very simple. It's none of your business.
Well,
I just said, did you really say that to me? They said, oh, I'd like to repeat it again. It's none of your business.
actually, it is our business.
Thank you, Mary Alice. It is.
If they're out-of-state corporations, the law says that they have to register with the Arizona Secretary of State, and he has to keep a list. And if they're an out-of-state corporation, they have to appoint an in-state representative that is a resident or a person in state. And those things are listed at the Arizona Secretary of State's office. And so it is law in Arizona already, that they are required if they're an out of state, and they do call all corporations that are corporations from out of state, not Arizona corporations, foreign. So there is some confusion there, because we actually are pretty sure that we have foreign ownership out of the US of a couple of parks. So anyway, but there is already a law that addresses that. However, when you look at the list, I had and did some work for Ray and me, a financial investigator, and she gave us a list of parks and who the owners were and who the representatives were. And what they're doing is they are opening an office in Maricopa County and one in Pima County. And they list the same two guys as the in-state representative for like all of the parks. But their contact information is California, which is a violation of law. And so I have, and I think Ray probably has that information, that a lady by the name of RJ Levy, a financial investigator, got for us. And so anyway, so that, you know, that's something that needs to be addressed and enforced. And that's something that I'm forwarding to the Attorney General. She's so busy right now with all these lawsuits over politics that I haven't gone ahead and sent that to her. But that definitely has to have something. And your information about questioning the park, about who the owners were, and if they were registered in the state of Arizona, you can follow that up. You can go on the Arizona Secretary of State's website and look it up. And so, and if you don't find them there, then we need to forward that to the Attorney General as well.
We knew that, Mary Alice. We just wanted to see if they would be honest and admit it.
Yeah, sure.
And of course they didn't. And it was just a secondary thing. We had already looked it up and knew exactly. But you're right with these, how they're appointing someone if they're a foreign entity within the state, like ELS. Theirs is in, like you just said, Mary Alice, in California, and they represent Sedona Shadows up in our area, where the lot rent fees today, a property went on the market for $33,000 because the lot rent starts at $1,800 a month. So the owner of the property says, give me anything, I can't continue to pay this amount. So we were trying to help them find out who actually owned it. So that was the nature of how we started. But we did find out where to go.
Good.
Thank you, Mary Alice.
Isn't there, Mary Alice, you probably can address this. In the mobile home landlord tenant laws, it is a law that they must post it, who the owner is and their contact information. It needs to be in a place where the residents can see it.
That's correct.
So there again, it's lack of enforcement of mobile home landlord tenant laws.
We talked some about this idea of, do we want them to register or not? And maybe this is just like an idea of how much we want to prioritize that. So you could kind of go in a couple different directions of, is it mostly focused for accountability? We mostly want to focus on giving the Department of Housing more explicit authority to enforce. Are we trying to create something new? We're trying to require registration. What do people think about like the best strategy at this point for having more of this enforcement?
Well, registration seems like a logical first step.
I agree with that too.
Pay money for it?
Yeah, there's a fee with it when they register.
Which in the state will probably be passed on to residents. In
Colorado,
I think they can say they can charge half. Again, with no rent control, it might implicitly get passed on anyway in some ways. I think things have to be like always coupled with some rent increase protections. But yeah, I think it was, they were charging $24 and they could pass half of that on to residents.
That's not very much money.
Per year.
Yeah, per year. Thank you, Kath.
It's going up 36, I think, something like that.
Yeah, I have to agree with Mary Alice about the Department of Housing, is if they're not going to, again, have the staff or whatever's taken, we need to create something new. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, I think one of the things you might think about is having registration fees go to whatever the regulatory agency is to build up funds to have staffing. That's what was said before about the agencies not wanting to add something to an agency that doesn't have enough staff. If the registration fees went to the enforcement agency to fund staffing to do the enforcement, that seems to be the place to do it, not to put it on the residents, but to have those registration fees go to enforcement.
That's a very good idea.
Well, one thing to keep in mind is if you put a fee on the mobile homeowners to get, the law enforced, we don't have that on housing, rental housing. We don't have that on other things. And Arizona Department of Housing, that's the name, Arizona Department of Housing. So they, therefore, all of their other activities that they do are covered by your tax money in the budget that they get from the state. And so, you need to take that into consideration as well. Are the mobile home people being singled out, having to pay their own way, in addition to the state taxes that we pay? There's other questions. Now, property taxes on houses, one of the arguments is that the property taxes on housing, on regular housing is much higher than what we pay. We pay personal property taxes. So if you use that argument, it's reasonable to charge the resident in a mobile home park the $24. So, there's both sides to be looked at there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a matter of trying to figure out a way to fund the enforcement so it really becomes, something that's workable.
Mm-hmm.
The next policy we've already started to talk about, and that's this expanding the eligibility for the relocation fund and implementing changes to improve its usefulness. And we've talked some about it, but maybe we could go a little bit deeper into that conversation. I know people in this room have a lot of experience with relocation fund. Some ideas we've talked about before is increasing the amount, looking at the licensure requirements to ensure that there are enough movers who are licensed. That might also help address some of the high costs. And then this part about decreasing the rent increase percent when it would kick in, and requiring that park owners pay, not just in the case of a closure, but in the case of a rent increase, if people are become eligible for relocation funds. There's some ideas we've floated so far. Want to respond to any of those or share some of their own? I know people in this room have a lot more experience with relocation fund than I.
We had a lady at our park, so I can only just speak from the information given to me. Her trailer was prior to 1978, and so she wanted to apply to move it. It was only single wide. But as the process started, she found out that there were really no parks in Arizona that would take her unit. So right off the bat, she had nowhere to go. And the relocation fund stated that it has to be moved to another park. we were always under the impression that maybe she could take it somewhere else and put it on land, but I guess that is not correct. And then again, the fees just to move a single wide were quoted to her between 40 and 60,000, but they were 2 years behind and couldn't get to it for all that period of time. So needless to say, she walked away from her unit and the park got it back.
3 years ago, I did a survey of the haulers from the list at the Department of Housing. The haulers have to be registered with the Department of Housing in order to participate in the relocation fund. And at that time, 3 years ago, it was $30,000 to move a double wide that was not in ground set, and up to $20,000 to move a single wide. And Pat Shonick and I, she's on the line here, negotiated with MHCA on raising the, through the Department of Housing, raising the amount that would be paid out, which was like $7,500 for a single wide before. And so we tried to get it higher at the time, and Pat can speak to that. But that's just $12,500 for a single wide and $20,000 for a double wide was as much as MHCA would go for. And so unfortunately, the lobbyist and for AMHO and the lobbyists for MHCA and everybody worked against us in getting that increased. And so that was as much as we could get at that time. And also,
Mary Alice, can I ask you a question about that real fast?
yes,
Why would MHCA care if people can withdraw more from the fund?
they don't want empty lots. If your rent goes up and you can move out, they got empty lots, they're losing money. And so they fought that because they don't want empty lots. And, you know, that's the case. So actually, the haulers all told me that it takes them 120 days from the time they get a call for relocation, someone wanting to move their unit. It takes 120 days for them to get permits and actually affect the move. They have to get all the permits from every county, every state they cross through, and get, you know, permits for when they can be on the road and when they can't be on the highway. And then the setup has to be inspected, and then all the local municipalities have to come and inspect the setup, and all of those things have fees. And so anyway, you know, it's a very detailed thing with a lot of regulation that happens and everything. So that's the process of moving, and they have to be, in order to participate in it, the relocation fund, they have to be registered through the state.
Can you explain that part? That's for the haulers? Or Mary Alice, who is that needs to be registered? Did you want to say something, Pat? I think you just went back on mute. You went off or went back on.
Okay, can you hear me now? The sad thing is, there are haulers out there that aren't certified by the state who will do a more reasonable job. Like if I wanted to move my home, which is fairly new, out to my grandson's ranch, I could move it cheaper than what's being moved with these. And I know people like Silver King that are taking them out of Shadow Mountain and bringing them down to Tucson. They're not paying what those certified haulers are for this. The other thing is, it ends up, people are out of their home for about 60 days. And the stuff that was in their home has to go into storage for that long. And so that 20,000 on a double wide is a drop in the bucket to what it would cost to go through the process of what they have.
Have those of you who've been working on this issue for a while looked at what it would take to change the hauling requirement and the registration requirement? Like, who is that by state statute? Or does the Department of Housing decide how it's certified and what the fees are for that?
No idea.
You're talking to me. I'm not hearing well. You know, I don't know what it would do to get more haulers to want to qualify to do it, because I do know people out there that can do it. And, you know, I've been around the trucking industry all of my life. And I know that there are guys that come in and hook onto them and move them out. They brought a couple of new ones into my park a couple of months ago, and those guys that brought them in, just bring them in and boom, boom, they were in. The thing is, Silver King is not finding anybody to get them put together, leveled out, and down on the lots so that they can put on awnings and do the electrical and gas and put in driveways and all that kind of stuff. So those homes have sat there since the 1st of June, and not a thing has been done to them. And they hauled those 2 homes in here in a matter of about 4 hours, had them both set down, and they were gone. There is just so much other stuff that gets involved in it that very frankly, I don't see very many people using the relocation fund because it's just costing them a fortune to do it.
I just want to add something about the relocation opportunity or fund for families who needs to move their homes because the rent increased. What I see when we visit the mobile home parks, many of the houses are too old or in critical condition that I don't see that they are okay to move them, because my concern is that they may suffer some damages that maybe will not more be safe to live again on the mobile home. So apart from all the process and the cost and the waiting time, I don't know if it's worth it to move the mobile home when the mobile home is not in a good condition.
Well, I apologize for talking so much, but there's a lot to be talked about and a lot to consider. As far as these older homes, my point that I want to make is, yes, some of them are too old probably to move, and there's no place to move them because of the restrictions for the mobile home parks, which we all want some restrictions so that they stay nice and everything. But I can tell you that once you get evicted out of the mobile home park, the park is very happy to seize that mobile home, even though it's old, and resell it. What you need is a law that says that if you're evicted from the mobile home park, that the park has to pay you the value of your mobile home, your asset. And so they need to have a way that makes it a penalty for the mobile home park for being so quick on evictions, like for utilities attached to your rent. And so there's got to be a deterrent to the current owners for the way they are doing business. And this being able to seize your asset 30 days after you've been evicted from a mobile home is, when you can't move the mobile home, even if it's a new one in 30 days, is really, really unrealistic. And frankly, this is my opinion, that the utility problems we're having are
Uh-oh.
We might have lost Mary Alice for a moment. It might be a good segue to move to the proposed legislation around protecting the home in the case of an eviction. Does anyone else have anything they want to say about relocation before we move on to that? I'm gonna pull this up and then
I was going to ask if it's worth it for AMHO to try to increase the amounts. Is it even worth it? I mean, I don't know. Again, increase the amounts again when it's still so hard to do the whole thing. I mean, we could do it, but
I wonder if the relocation fund is something that we should table for the next session, and just like, I think maybe we could work with a few partners at U of A to like kind of work on a education campaign around the relocation fund. I mean, it's just really clear it's not working very well, and I wonder if it just needs to change pretty drastically in order to work well. And that might require some more like education around it. I mean, I've been studying manufactured homes in Arizona for 3 years, and like I still have so much to learn. But like you guys always teach me stuff about the relocation fund, and I'm always shocked. And so I wonder if like working out some visuals around it and like looking down the line for like a bigger overhaul might make more sense.
Yeah, because this was written when these homes were only 10 and 20 years old. These homes are now 50 and 60 years old. So it's not about relocating them anymore. It's about replacing them.
if we could have a committee work on it in between this and the next meeting. Are there any
Yeah.
folks here who want to be a part of that? And of course, you can email me after too, but if anyone would like to be a part of that, I can send a follow-up after the meeting. A little study session together and come up with a better draft.
I just want to add one more thing about the relocation fund is the for the family who are undocumented to file the process and to claim the right that they have to relocation fund. I don't know if the relocation fund also will include family who are undocumented, which is the fear that I notice when we visit the mobile home parks. They don't want to do anything because the biggest fear that these families are facing is that they don't want to get involved with ICE or with a deportation process, and that makes them more vulnerable. So relocation fund may apply for many people who has the citizenship or a legal status, but I'm always thinking about the additional barriers that the families face, the lack of the English language and also the lack of documentation. I know they have rights, but the fear is very tangible. And how can we create trust and help them to trust? But it's difficult. It's very difficult for the undocumented families.
I have heard that the relocation fund, it doesn't matter status, or it shouldn't matter people's status, because none of the money is government money. It's money paid by the residents, but that in practice, the Department of Housing does say that they require a social security number. They could just require a social security or an ITIN, is my understanding, because the reason they're asking for it is because of the tax liability, because I think people are taxed as income, the money they're getting from relocation, though maybe someone else from AMHO could explain that a little bit more. And we could take this up as a topic for the study group.
And then Ray, maybe that specific part, we can tell to the resident of the mobile home park who are undocumented that just what you just say is just information and education in that area that I didn't know that. Doesn't matter the legal status, IT number can be okay, and this is not a federal money. But I think those details, they don't know it, and they even things are completely is the right, like they're protected against retaliation for simple things like violating the notification that they receive. So they are afraid. They are afraid. That's the bottom part with these families.
Put up one more call for, I saw Elise's hands raised, for who wants to meet between now and the next meeting to kind of delve into relocation fund topics. Any other takers? We got Elise Otto. Mary Alice, I know you're been working on this for a long time. If you want to finish what you were saying before you got cut off as well. Oh, you're muted. It's still muted too, Mary Alice.
Well, while she's getting that done, we should have somebody from AMHO on that committee. I'm not sure who at this point.
Yeah,
All right, I finally got it unmuted, sorry. I had to switch my phone because I didn't I didn't notice my battery was going dead. I took, because of other things going on in the home, I took my computer to the bedroom and tried to do it in here, and it wasn't optimal, believe me. So anyway, what I was saying about the relocation fund and the people that are trying to move in the relocation fund, and the evictions and no place to go with the older units, if there was less incentive to seize the homes, then we would have less utility problems also. I think that my opinion is, I started to tell you, my opinion is that they are using fees to evict people. And rent has some kind of a situation on it where if it's more than 10% plus the CPI, they have to send out a legal notice to the resident that they can apply to the relocation fund. And so they're using utilities as a separate thing because they can evict them because they haven't paid utilities, and then seize the homes. And like I said, they are perfectly happy to sell those old homes in their parks and collect that money. And so that's what I was going to say. Now, I have worked on a lot of this stuff a long time, and my brain has kind of quit working here, so I can't tell you anything else today. So sorry. And again, I apologize for being so talkative. And I know that you guys have put a lot of work into your proposals and everything, but my advice is be careful, because you don't want to do something that jettisons everything you do. You know, I think you need to think about the core issues and stick with the core issues. And, you know, all of these things are good to do. I don't disagree with any of them, but you're not going to get them all done at one time. And so you got to pick the most prevalent one, which is utilities and evictions. And so those are the two most important. One thing I would like to tell you is we just had a Canadian that because of the rent increase, contacted the Department of Housing. And the only way he could get payment out of the Department of Housing is if he got a tax number, a US tax number. And he said there was no way he'd ever get a US tax number as a Canadian citizen. And so he walked away from the mobile home. They were happy to take it. You know, they're going to resell it. He abandoned it. And so we have a lot of these Canadians that are coming down here and they're paying into the fund, but yet if they don't have a Social Security number and a tax number, they're not going to get any money out of the relocation fund. Wow.
Thanks for bringing those up, including the prioritization. And that's exactly why we're here today, right? We're not expecting that we're going to make all of these recommendations as things to do this year, but to bring to this group the space to have the conversation and to decide together. Something I can do is after the meeting too, is to send out a poll for people who were able to attend today and those who aren't, of what you think the most important things are to focus on this year. I do want to share, since you had mentioned the need to protect homes post-eviction, this other piece of legislation that we've talked about, we don't have a clear plan of where it would fall into the law yet, but have some examples from other states. So the basic premise is, let's implement legislation to protect homeowners from losing their equity, from losing their house in the case of eviction. So some examples are, in Colorado, the homeowner retains the right to sell or move the home for, it's actually 60 days. So the first 30 days, they don't have to pay anything. And then if they want the right to sell it for another 30 days, they have to pay that month's rent. But they don't have to pay any back rent or any of the court costs or the filing fees or late fees. In Virginia, they have the right to sell or rent the manufactured home for 90 days post-eviction. And in California and in Iowa, they both require that if the home is sold by the park post-eviction, that after they've paid the park everything that they owe, that they have to give the remainder to the residents. So I brought up the policies here. I'm not entirely sure, and this is where I would really want to brainstorm this together, where this would go, if this would go under remedies for abandonment, if this would go under remedy after termination, if after the rental agreement is terminated that they get this action or this right, if this would be an entirely new statute that would go maybe alongside one of the other ones of, this is just copied the Virginia law of the rent to sell or rent the home after eviction. And I guess I didn't totally copied it because I changed it to 120 rather than 90 days, knowing that sometimes it's hard to sell or rent in that short of a timeline. So those are some initial thoughts around there. It's not one that I have as much experience with. I feel like the utility charge one, it could a lot more clearly and confidently say, if you change these words in this law, it's going to make a difference. Do people have thoughts on this so far, or suggestions of other people who might?
Ray, I have a question on that. Where have the other states put this in under what you're wondering? I think your question is what category, where would we insert this into the current, where is there any help from looking at where other states have put it?
Yeah, I think it would likely be in the Mobile Home Park Landlord Tenant Act in that area. You know, it's not exactly a copy paste because our laws are different, right? So how we're adding the laws would be different. In terms of how it's after it's sold, of ensuring that the money goes back to the resident, that I think could be in the Landlord Tenant Act, but some of that could actually be outside of the Landlord Tenant Act as well.
What would have the most likelihood of being incorporated and enforced the most rapidly, quickly? To put it as an addition to the Landlord Tenant Act, Mobile Home Landlord Tenant Act or separately? Seems like separately would really be a chore, but I don't know for sure.
I guess maybe a starting question is like, which, we could work with lawyers and legislators to figure out where it should go.
Mhm.
But how do these proposals sound? Are any of these, we could do more, try to push for more than one, try to push for one, maybe these, try to push for something else?
Well, I know in my park, Bella Capri, I have seen multiple cases of people either walking away from their home or being evicted with no recourse. The problem is the landlord goes in and remodels to a certain degree and then sells it. So getting payment out of that might be a little tricky because the landlord has invested money in it and they aren't selling it always as is. And I think that might be an issue we'd want to explore a little further. Does that complicate things, or how could we accommodate that? I think giving them time and requiring that they be reimbursed would certainly remove the incentive for, like in one case that I'm very familiar with, the person was intimidated to the point and harassed to the point and threatened to the point that they just walked and left their mobile home, and the park was very happy after 30 days to call it abandoned and to claim it. Now probably the market value of that was maybe 25,000. If they go in and remodel it and then they want to sell it for 40, then how do you deal with that issue? Maybe a value at time of eviction.
I think that's the simplest answer to the question, Jan, is the value at the time of eviction less. That's all you got to say in the law. The value at the time of eviction less the amount of money owed in back rent to the park and the cost of selling it.
That's
all
straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's not a big issue.
Now they probably have to wait, of course, until it's sold and then figure out, crunch those numbers, but that's pretty straightforward. And it seems like it would be fairly easy to figure.
Well, I've lived in a lot of states but never lived in a mobile home park. But in the states that I've lived in, their housing law worked like that in some states, if you had equity in the house, they couldn't evict you until the equity is used up. Now, that might be something to consider. And the other thing is, if you had equity in the house and you were evicted in some states, they had to pay you the amount that was over the cost of the amount you owed and the cost to sell the property. So there is housing law around the country for regular housing on how they handle those things. And so maybe somebody should look at that and see if any of that could be adapted to mobile homes and in mobile home parks. I think a lawyer would be appropriate to look at other laws on that.
I love the idea around the equity too, because a lot of people don't have the title, but maybe they've paid in towards the equity. So saying you don't even have to have the title. If you have paid in $4,000 towards this $20,000 house, you can't be evicted until that amount of equity is used up.
So you're talking about contract for deed. Contract for deed comes under probably total different law than, owning equity in a place, because the way the law works on contract for deed is you don't own the mobile home until it's totally paid for. And so I don't know if that would fall under the same category as what I was just talking about. There again, an attorney could answer that question.
So if I understand what Mary Alice is saying, it sounds like the things we've been discussing would apply more rapidly and more accurately to people who actually own their home outright. And that would be pretty simple. If they sell it, then they must reimburse for the equity that's in it or reasonable market value at the time of eviction. And there's a lot of people here that need that kind of protection just in my park. I don't know what other parks are experiencing.
Anyone else have thoughts on that? I worry a little bit about who gets to decide the market value and how that's determined.
I mean, these
But
homes,
there'd have to be a formula.
they're praised by the like the county has the appraisal values for these homes.
Well, if the assessed value is way below what market value is.
Yeah. They are appraisers. You could insert in the law, there's mobile homes appraisers. I just sold my mobile home and moved out, and the purchasers hired an appraiser to come in and to appraise it. I put the value on it I wanted, and but that could be incorporated in the law that the appraised value at the time of the abandonment by a certified mobile home appraiser. You just put in there the requirements.
Mm-hmm. I think the utility transparency and the protection of equity for if someone is evicted seem, in my mind, to be really top concerns and something that could be addressed maybe more quickly, because we're pretty clear on what we want there and we have examples of what could be inserted.
What were
I
the
think
two
raise,
as the utility accountability? What was the other one?
The protection of equity in the case of eviction.
I think Ray's idea of the survey is a good one.
Yes, absolutely. Having, are you talking about registering the mobile home parks?
No, I'm talking about the surveying the residents or the people on the committee, not necessarily all residents, but the people on the committee. What they think
Yes.
the most urgent things are. The ones that have put their time in studying this already should be polled and asked what their opinion of the greatest things are that they need to be determined first.
I
But just
tried to
thought-
make a poll right now, but I don't think we have that power here. So
Oh, okay.
does anyone else want to weigh in on one of an area that they'd like to work on? If you want to be on a committee to help research one of these, or two, if you have any other thoughts on priorities, other announcements, anything else you'd like to share before we close the meeting?
I have two thoughts. One on the registration, that would be helpful in so many different ways. If no other reason than to show the politicians how many constituents are out there. And I know Mary Alice has the exact number. What is it? 450,000 mobile homes in the state of Arizona?
No, there's about 400,000 on rented land. According to Governor Ducey's 2020 proclamation, and when you add in the number that was selling each year of mobile homes, it gets up just under 400,000.
Okay, and then I know in our park, they've brought in like 8. So I'm sure the number's probably gone up. But in any case, it's a sizable amount that I don't know if that would have any sway politically for representatives to pay attention to that number of constituents.
Is in Animo in your listening sessions, because I really want to think about like, what do residents want? What are the top priorities? How are you digesting that information? Are these kind of questions you're asking there of what residents' priorities?
Exactly. That's what we're doing. And we've only had 2 so far, and they were small groups, but we took notes on what people said, and then they had an opportunity to fill out a little questionnaire type thing. But mostly we just wanted people to hear each other, to know they weren't alone, and to know that we were working on these issues and plan to work on them. It's just it's just so frustrating. I still think enforcement is so important. And I don't,
Yes, yeah.
I know we need to do more research and all this stuff, but it's just frustrating to have the laws and not have them enforced, to me. It's just,
So maybe focusing on the enforcement of the current laws where we don't have to reinvent the wheel would be a good start.
I think
Mhm.
it's the most important one because ASU Law School for AMHO, and I worked on the committee, compared the Arizona Landlord Mobile Home Tenant Act with all 50 states, which I have the report for. And our Landlord Tenant Act is pretty good. The problem is enforcement.
Yes.
And that's the major problem. And so number one would be enforcement. Number two
Yeah.
would be utilities. And number three would be protecting assets. Those
Yep.
are the top three things in my mind that would be the greatest thing. And I'm sorry I can't be on one of your committees because my group is working on several things. And I just wanted to tune in with you to find out what was going on with you and what you were planning. And so I can't be on your committee, and I'm doing a project for the Attorney General. So I'm loaded up at the moment and I can't be on your committee, but I'd like to stay in tune to know what you're doing. And, you know, if you have any questions that I might answer from past experience, I'd be happy to do it.
What was the third one, Mary Alice? Enforcement, utilities, and what?
Protection of assets.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
sorry, Mary Alice, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you didn't interrupt me. I was finished.
Ray, I have a comment about protecting the assets. Lo voy a decir en español. Por ejemplo, lo que pasó a Odalis, de que la desalojaron, ¿verdad? Y ella no sabe nada de que ella todavía tiene derechos sobre su casa. Y eso es proteger su casa, es protecting the assets. Pero la falta de información otra vez es clave para seguir luchando, ¿no? Entonces, y cuando estábamos caminando en Saguaro Park, tomé fotos a varias mobile home que estaban evicted. Y hablé con un vecino y los vecinos dijeron que ellos nomás se fueron, estaban sus juguetes, estaban todavía hasta una televisión. Me quebró el corazón mirar por la ventana y ver que todavía estaba una televisión y juguetes y ropa. Entonces, para mí es una clara evidencia de que no saben que todavía, aunque fueron desalojados, que todavía tienen derecho a su casa. Entonces, con esta población, esta población que estamos nosotros, Poder Casas Móviles, significa todavía ir un paso más atrás sobre informar un poco más y hacer la voz y ayudar a estas personas de que aunque fueron desalojadas, la casa todavía es de ellos. ¿Qué derechos tienen sobre el título, sobre la casa, sobre el periodo de tiempo? Toda esa información clara, porque a veces ese time frame is key to make the process, and sometimes they don't know that. Y es como estar luchando, pero a la misma vez hay diferentes tipos o niveles de awareness, como en este caso con las familias de Saguaro Park. Es, ah, es, es algo que nomás estoy pensando. Y pues no sé cómo va a ser lo del comité, qué horas, qué días probablemente puedo participar haciendo research a la medida de mis posibilidades. Creo que puedo hacer algo. Ok.
Yes.
Ujú.
But to respond to that, we'll incorporate the question into the responses. Seeing families, their home with the eviction letter on there, but still closed TV, children's toys still outside, mostly in the Spanish speaking parks. of also the idea of, do they know what their rights are to maintain the home too? So not just the part that we've been talking about of strengthening the rights, but knowing that even people who might still have rights to the home, not knowing about those, including the rights about the relocation fund too. I think that part of, the awareness raising as well. And Imelda said maybe she could be part of the committee as well for research. I think we're gonna have one meeting on Monday at 9 to do some research on state by state legislation in other places and try to do some research there. So if folks want to join, please drop me a line and we'll send you the info. And try to do a lot of research this month, including work on a survey, and we could get together, Kath or someone else from AMHO, to ensure that we're able to get a survey out to this group, but also in English and Spanish to other residents too, of what are people's priorities, and let's have a couple of recommendations coming forward from this group to hopefully make some legislative changes this session. We're over 3, so I'm gonna let folks go. See, Elise has a comment, and if anyone else, I'm happy to stay on if anyone else has more comments.
I have one when Elise is done.
I just thanks everybody. This is like such a great meeting. I just wanted to say, like, future committees, maybe a communications committee to address Imelda and some of the legislative priorities as well. And we can like link in some resources about some public communications, both for policymakers and for people living in homes to know their rights in Spanish and English. But that can be down the line, just thinking about how to make sure we're closing the gap on that one.
You have a comment too, Jan?
If I may, the HUD money that the Pima County and the city of Tucson got, they were allocating and proposed money for education on
Sounded like there was a question or recollection that part of the price grant had an education and outreach component. Hopefully y'all can still hear me. I see a couple folks are frozen, but that is the case. It does. And we plan to have local nonprofits doing a lot of that education and outreach work that will be paid for through that price grant.
So we have to keep in mind too, that even though people can be educated on what their rights are, enforcement is the key. You can know what your rights are, but if nobody's enforcing it, your rights, it's a moot point.
Thank you so much, everyone. Good to be with you.
Thanks.
Ray, I have a quick question when we're done.
Sure, I'm happy to stay on. So
I'm going to, I have another call and we are hosting.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
But having said that, I can put this one on mute and just go to my other meeting. And when I see you all log off, I'll end it as the city representative host person. How about that?
Sure.
Sounds
Y
good.
quiero pedir disculpas que pagamos para tener interpretación a esta junta. Es algo que priorizamos, es tener interpretación a esta junta. Y lo siento, no sé qué pasó con el intérprete, pero es algo que espero que la ciudad va a asegurar que lo tiene la próxima vez. So, sorry that interpretation is something we prioritize, and that we have booked interpretation for this meeting and don't know what happened, but the city will be making sure that we have it for the next meeting. Y a la próxima junta tal vez podemos hablar de cómo hacer juntas presencial otra vez también, o hacerlo más accesible. Este junta es muy enfocado en los detalles de la ley, pero también hay que tener juntas que que son más interactivas también. Also, in the future, having, and this one's like very focused on some details of some of the policy and some of the legal language, but also to have on our future meeting more interactive, more accessible in other ways too. Jan, do you want to make your comment or you want to wait till?
Well, if people want to hear it, it's fine. I don't know where I got the idea that we were also going to discuss reasonable accommodation for handicapped, but is that another meeting or